Clunes Booktown Festival is a celebration of the book, filled with bookstalls, author talks, workshops and thought-provoking conversations in the historic Victorian township of Clunes.
I would like to begin by acknowledging country, that we're on the lands of the Gawimarra people, and acknowledge their elders past and present and their leadership in looking after country and custodianship of this land. Sovereignty was never ceded. I'm joined today by three amazing guests, so the creme de la creme of prize-winning and extraordinary contributors to our cultural richness of this country. I will begin by reading out their bios, just so you get a glimpse of who we have in the room today. Jeanine Leane is a Wiradjuri poet, an academic from southwest New South Wales. Her poetry, short stories, critique and essays have been published in Hayket, an interdisciplinary journal of women's literature, Australian Poetry Journal, Antipodes, Overland and Sydney Review of Books. Jeanine has published widely in the areas of Aboriginal literature, writing, otherness, literary critique and creative non-fiction, and is the recent winner of the Victorian Premier's Literary Award for Poetry. Vicki Couzens is a Gawimarra woman from the Western Districts of Victoria. Vicki acknowledges her ancestors and elders who guide her work. She has worked in Aboriginal community affairs for 45 years. Vicki's contributions in the reclamation, regeneration and revitalisation of cultural knowledge and practice extends across the arts and creative cultural expression spectrum, including language revitalisation, ceremony, community arts, public art, visual art and performative arts and writing. She's a senior knowledge custodian for Possum Skin Cloak, story and language reclamation and revival in her Kirang Wurrung mother tongue. Did I get that right? Close enough. Evelyn Araluen is a poet, researcher and co-editor of Overland. Her widely published criticism, fictions and poetry have been awarded the Nikita Brophy Short Fiction and Poetry Prize for writing for young Indigenous writers, the Judith Wright Poetry Prize, a Willis Centre Next Chapter Fellowship and a Nelma Sydney Literary Travel Fund grant. Evelyn's collection Dropbear was shortlisted for the 2021 Judith Wright Award for a poetry collection and the 2022 Kenneth Slessor Prize for Poetry and won the 2022 Stella Prize. Born and raised on Darrell country, she's a descendant of the Bundjalung Nation. And I'm Jane Harrison and my heritage is Murrawarri from northern New South Wales and I'm a writer and playwright. So, now to the book. This book really comprises a who's who of First Nations poets in the contemporary realm, and I'm thrilled. And it's not just poetry, it's also essays throughout the collection, the anthology. So it's a really rich and profound discussion about the importance of language in the contemporary world. And I'd just like to begin by asking each of the writers to read their piece for us. So, Jeanine, could I start with you?
Thanks, Jane. My piece is called Nina Guya Nyang, which is in language, and I'm very much a beginning Wiradjuri speaker, means these words. These words cry out and I hear them. Learn to mould them and shape them like clay. There should have been a time for such words. For this word, Nina, Nyang, and a word for such time, Guayu. How clunky these are as I first stumble over them, grappling like the child I should have been when I felt them. Winanga, Duini, sang them, Babi, spoke them, yay. Now my clumsy tongue struggles over each new syllable my Nurambang country gives me. Each one I want to devour like the sweetest thing I ever tasted. I want to suck every shred of marrow, dumdumbira, from each sound, to swallow it whole, Gawimarra, to know what it is to eat for the first time. I want to feel like the child born to these words, Gudadurinya, Nina Niang. Good.
Jeanine, can I just ask you, what came alive for you? The title of the book is Words That Sing the World Alive. What came alive for you writing that piece?
The collection, Words That Make the World Sing, was put together by the wonderful editor Jasmine McGaughey and published by the University of Queensland Press. And Jasmine collected a series of poems or reflections that we had done in language. So this poem, these words, was written a few years previous to this coming out for a project that I had the great privilege to be invited to, coinciding with a time when I really thought, age 50-something, that I need to really learn my language properly because it's there now. And because the older people weren't allowed to speak it, and my grandmother did know some words, but my mother didn't, or my mum's generation, because they weren't allowed. My grandmother did remember some words that she taught us, particularly around the places where we lived, which is on the Murrumbidgee River, and she taught us some of the proper names for things that had been renamed around there. But yeah, I was invited to this really important project, and shout out to the Red Room Poetry for doing this project called Poetry in First Languages, where they ask us to choose a language speaker. They ask some poets to choose a language speaker, custodian, elder, who they might like to work with to do some poetry in first languages. And for me, it was a no-brainer to choose Elaine Lomas as senior Wiradjuri, and she's the sister of Uncle Dr. Stan Grant. He gives us the Wiradjuri dictionary. Yeah, and Elaine Wiradjuri Yina from Gawimarra River in Condobolin. And so I worked with Elaine and first started learning words other than nouns, like action words, like we are and I am. So how do you feel? You feel just like I said in the poem, right? Like the child that you should have been, born to this language, and this language should have been my birthright. For all of us, wherever we are, whatever is that first language, should have been our birthright. But it wasn't. And I think that it still was, but it was taken away from us is probably a better way to say it. And so a lot of people find this it is traumatic in a way, because when you start to learn the language, you go back inside yourself and the words for country do mean something different. They take on a whole new resonance that English doesn't really can't really capture, doesn't have the nuance to do, but it is also extremely spiritually cleansing and culturally so. And it's also like justice and respect for those older people, elders who did keep these languages alive for us, because I was taught to say, in contrast to what the anthropologists told us, even as a kid, that the languages are not extinct. We used to hear that a lot, extinct or dead Aboriginal languages. But the old people used to say to us, no, they're asleep or they're hiding because it's not safe for them. But we can wake them up or they can come out when it's safe. So that's what's happening for me. And for a lot of Wiradjuri speakers, and I'll just say quickly to end that bit that I wanted to say is that in particular, I think this, you can say this about other languages, but I'll say it about the one I know because that's the one I'm familiar with. The Wiradjuri language program is growing really big now, and there are a lot of, and we will get a generation of first speakers now, again, in a generation or so, because there are schools across country New South Wales now that instead of doing LOT, languages other than English, well, they are doing LOT, but instead of doing Indonesian or French or German or something for LOT, they're doing Wiradjuri because they're on Wiradjuri country. And that could be a good precedent for all schools. Your language other than English is your first language, that where is your school built on, or where's your thing built on? Well, that's the language other than English that should be there. Thanks.
Going to your piece, you've worked in language reclamation for many generations. You're doing that hard work that Jeanine was just talking about in community and building on your father's legacy as well with the dictionary that he developed in the 1990s. Could you just read your piece to us and then we'll have a chat about that? Thank you.
Gurundi pundia ye kandich wanga. Behave properly, live in proper relationship, listen, understand. Wangan nutjung wukaba mana wangan nutjung, pundi ayi jamatich. Respect, give and hold or receive respect, live in law. Matui matui kil, matui, kian miringi. Have kindness, compassion, be kind, care, love for country. Kian kayam pati, care and love for all kin. Lipin miringi, kawin miringi. Sing to country, dance to country. Lakawanung nirang wurung niyi. Lipin wanung nirang wurung niyi. We speak our mother tongue. We sing our mother tongue. Kawin manung nirang wurung niyi. Kian tupu wanung miring niyi. We dance our nirang wurung niyi, our mother tongue. We love our country. Prangawan pat paku yupu. Let's not fight. Mungai wata lakan niyi watnanda. Let's talk together. Mungai wata wangaki kan watnanda. Let's listen together. Yungama, this is a promise, reciprocity to give and receive, and a promise of futurity. Pang nuti wing wanung, we remember. Wata wanung watnanda, we come together. Do you want me to read the rest?
No, I think we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
We come together, which we are doing today in this room. So it's really like a set of protocols for how we need to behave in the world. Can you tell us a little bit about why you wrote that piece?
Well, like Jeanine said, kind of the brief was to write about a word, something in our language that made us sing, make the world sing. And I've been working in our language for over 25 years, following on from Dad, who published our dictionary in the 1990s, and where that's our aim, first language speakers. So I'm really trying to focus my work on that. But Gurundi is to behave properly, which sounds, pretty simple, but it's actually, I was talking with Jane about, I wrote about, because I get into the linguistics side of it to assist me in the work of redreaming our language back to life through our cultural way of being. And so behave properly, or Gurundi, is a semantic domain, which is, a domain of meanings or words that have a similar or same meaning. And idioms, I'm also looking at idioms because the idioms in your language, like Gurundi, have the words literally by themselves don't explain the meaning. It's the figurative meaning of the word. But Gurundi is all of those value principles, cultural value principles of how to live in relationship and live in law of the land in our cultural ways of being. So it's a very big word and a very important word, and it makes my heart and spirit sing.
Yes, you also talk about it, how it fills the body. It comes out in the body in the way the words come off your tongue. And do you want to talk a little bit about that?
As Jeanine referred to, when it does. It fills your body, and your tongue is. It is tricky. There's a couple of words in there. I'm like, I've got to say this one now. It's a bit hard because we are relearning the sounds of our language when our tongues have been speaking in English and our sounds are different. Oh, there's bagpipes. I love bagpipes. Sorry, just distracted for a minute. And my mum's side's all Scottish, so. Yeah, so that embodiment of language is something that is very much that personal and internal and activation in people of that sense of belonging and connectedness and of knowing who you are and where you come from. And I've been having conversations with a friend of mine about what is language, and it's everything. Like we talk about culture, but language is everything because it contains everything of your culture. And it's an intangible but very embodied.
Great, fantastic. Thank you. Evelyn, we'll come to you now. I read that you didn't write poetry until you started learning your language. Do you want to just talk a little bit about that before you read your piece?
Yeah, Dingiwala, as always, it is a deep honour to be a guest on these lands, and I'd like to pay my respect to the Djadjawarrung and to the broader Kulin Nation for their custodianship here, and also to thank everyone I'm sitting next to on the panel, because it's such an honour to be able to be sitting amongst incredible women who in their own ways and practices are all advocating for the continuity of our stories and culture. So very humbled to be here with you. So the poem that's in here is the very first poem that I ever wrote, and I wrote it in the context of a TAFE class that I was doing for Bundjalung language, where I was taught by the incredible late Drew Roberts, who was just such a gift, and he's so dearly and sorely missed. And I grew up in Darug country in the kind of broader Aboriginal Western Sydney community, and that's a very specific and particular form of community. It's made up not just of the Darug people. Many of those families who hold the longest stories of colonisation in this country, they still actually remain on their land and on their country. And I grew up in the context of many of these families who had been reconnecting with their histories and lineages despite remaining on their country, despite the fractures to those stories. And so even the distance from when I was a child to when I became, sort of a teenager and a young adult, the nature of the Darug community specifically was really transforming constantly. And things like Darug language reclamation and revival have been, becoming such a strong part of that community space. But the Western Sydney, the Druitt and all of those areas, it's not just the Darug families who are the custodians on that land. That's a community that's also made up of many other Aboriginal people who have, in the 30s to the 60s, it was mob coming in off of some of the missions throughout other parts of New South Wales. In the case of my family on my father's side, my great-grandfather had lived on the Aboriginal camp on the Darabin River, now referred to as the Hawkesbury River, and he was a Bundjalung man from Bayugal. And my grandfather had been removed from his parents and was not raised culturally or with that sense of identity. We have very few oral stories about my Bundjalung side of the family prior to that point. And one of the really key stories that we do have is of my Auntie Charlotte sitting under a table as a tiny little girl and hearing her father speak to my great-grandfather in Bundjalung language. And that's especially when you've experienced contexts of dislocation, which of course I didn't know growing up because I was growing up in an Aboriginal community made up of so many different mobs and had no idea that we were actually disconnected. Nobody told me that until I went to university and they were like, oh, did you know you're disconnected? And I was like, oh, okay. All right, fair cop. And so my sister and I went to Eora College, which is the Aboriginal TAFE in Redfern. And there'd been a flyer for, Bundjalung language class. And we just thought, right, let's give that a go because despite, not living on Bundjalung country, the pieces of culture that we got from that side of our family were really important and vital to us. And we were so privileged to be growing up with knowledge from extended family, Yorta Yorta and Wiradjuri and, and Ewan, and we had a great strength in that. But it became very important for me in my very early 20s to actually start to create my own sense of identity, especially as I was no longer, living at home where when I had to identify myself, it was just, oh yeah, I'm one of Barry and Kerry's gazillion children. And then that's it. And that's the end of the conversation. Even hearing my bio being read aloud there, I'm kind of like, oh yeah, this is something that, when you're forced to distill your history into a few lines, it's very flattening. But language and that sense of identity through language, and it's more than identity. It's there's so much cultural knowledge embedded in language, and things that, my father's a very culturally knowledgeable man and was taught many things. But I had the privilege of when I started learning language, being able to explain certain things to him that I was being taught, but he didn't know, and that was a really revelatory experience. So we had a TAFE assessment. We weren't being asked to prove how well we could speak Bundjalung, but we were being asked to document something about how the transformation we were undergoing as we were learning language, and something about the grammar and learning about the grammatical structures in Bundjalung unhinged English from my brain in a way that allowed me to write poetry. So I will read this poem, and if you don't like it, remember, it was the first poem I wrote and I was a baby, so don't be mean to me. And I just want to make a note, it's called Learning Bundjalung on Dharawal. I grew up on Darug country, but at the time I was basically living in Dharawal country, and there's a similar coastal geography in that region that is actually quite resonant with different parts of Bundjalung country. So Learning Bundjalung on Dharawal. Above his desk it is written, I wish I knew the names of all the birds. I know this room through tessellation of leaf and branch, Warangbil and Darangi, in the shade of a Kalsetsi, Cherokee honey locust, a flowering tree. I am relearning these hills and salt waters and all the places wrapped around this room. We both have Dagalol here, lovers, fathers, friends, conquerors, ghosts. But here in this new and ancient place, I ask him to name the song that swoops through this mosaic. Sometimes it is Wattlebird, sometimes it is Currawong. When we drive, he tells me king parrot, fairy wren, black cockatoo, and Dono Jalwan, and Bilin Bilin, and Yara. But the rest are just Nanganyibil. The rest are just bird. It is hard to unlearn a language, to unspeak the empire, to teach my voice to rise and fall like landscape, a topographic intonation. So in this place, the shape of my place, I am trying to sing like hill and salt water, to use old words from old country I am so far from. Bundjalung Daganai, Nyandawal no Yaya. And God, I don't even know if I'm saying it right. But I watch the bark twist, grey and slate and vanilla and vermilion. He tells me this is ribbon gum. So I find 5 words for this bark, and I promise I will learn them all. Because to hold him is to hold the tree that holds these birds I cannot name. And a word spoken here might almost sound like home. We are relearning this place through poetry. I open my book and say, Wayan. Here is a word which means road, but also root. And in it I am rooted, earthed, singing between 2 lands. I learned that Balan is both river and Milky Way, and that he is Baregi, the youngest child and the top of the tree, where the Ga will come to rest, to call its own name across the canopy, long after his word for it is gone.
Thank you. Jasmani in this collection writes, the muscles on my face are clunky, learning the shapes carved by rivers, known by sky. And Evelyn, I think you also captured that in your piece when you talk about, am I even saying it right? So you've all spoken about that, the challenges of relearning a language that you haven't, was your birthright, but has been denied. Can you talk a little bit about that, the challenges? I know one word of my Murawari language, and it's tattooed on my arm. It's Mukinj, which means women, and my daughters and I all have the same tattoos. So one word at a time, I'm reclaiming my language. Slow process.
Okay, I'll say something briefly first. I want to acknowledge Yal Malbadine to Elaine Lomas, Yal Malbadine meaning teacher. Also want to acknowledge other Yal Malbadine Galang teachers, particularly Auntie Iris Reed, who's a Narugul. Narugul is a different people. Narumain. See, this is really hard. This is what you mean, the language. Narumain, or some people might say the name of the town like Narromine, like Australian. Narumain. It's honey people. So, all these, the more you go beyond the first layer, the deeper that it goes into country. It is very hard to unlock this kind of empire out of your head or erase it or purge yourself, whichever way you like to say it, exorcism, whatever it is. Yeah, that's a strong one. But I was lucky. I was actually born in the 1960s. Not that that's necessarily lucky, but that's just happened to be the timing. But lucky enough to grow up on country, even though it was quite fraught, which is the Murrumbidgee River near, or Murrumbidgee, near, as it goes out of Gundagai, heads to Wagga on down on the back roads. There's a couple of little reserves out that way that all mean something in Wiradjuri. Like there's a place called Nangus, which is on one side of the river, Bangus. Nangus Bangus means this side or that side of the river. There's also a place out there that we learn called Tanandra, which is a place where the river falls. Gundagai itself means a place where the river swings, and a million little places out there that get missed out on in the colonial geography, like Wanabadgery, Urangeli, which you've never heard of, but they're all Mandalo, Tanandra, Bethangra, Ilabo. Where do I stop? But the significance of all those places with all those stories was something that I was lucky enough to grow up with, and even though it was a very fraught situation, and my grandmother spent quite a bit of time in an institution, sadly. She ended up being married to a settler farmer, not like that was a great relationship, but he did take a block on country, so we were on country. And so she used to gather us and call that a bit of a blessing, despite the, a strange irony. And I'm trying to draw a picture here of the lengths people went to make sure there was something for us to unlearn for. And so she used to have this word, not many words, but I used it in this piece, Nina, which is a Wiradjuri word for here. And it still is say, well, yeah, Nina, we're here, we're still here. And there's so much to learn just about being in the here of country of the place that you're from and the language. So there is that privilege of me having that connectivity to that spot, which seems to have subconsciously remained and resurfaced when I was doing this language journey. But as you go deeper and deeper into language, it's both an incredible rebirth, but it's also quite traumatic as well. It can be traumatic as you learn to uncover the deeper embodiment of the words and just how much has been, how much of the nuance has been taken away. Because one word in Wiradjuri says what thousands of words in English still can't say. And even just a statement, I was doing some work further up on Wiradjuri, South Wiradjuri country, but north of here, in Gawimarra on the Milawa, which you might know better as Albury on the Murray, but we don't use those words anymore. I'm trying to use the first language of a place. And when I was up in Albury, I was asked to kind of create something in language that reflected on the place. And I talked to the local elders, acknowledging here Auntie Edna Stewart in particular and Uncle Tony Murray, but they kept saying Nina, the word as well, like here. And so that's my statement for that museum and for the place. Nindu Nina, you are here. And what does that mean to be here in a place where a first language of place is here, and there is so much here, and it's calling on all people to just rethink the here and work backwards from here, because it could do a lot, and that gives people a lot of pause. And whenever I do poems now in galleries or any other places where I might be asked to do them, I don't translate them. This whole poem is on the wall, Niani, Nindu, Wiradjuri, Nurumbangu, this is Wiradjuri country, Dingaling, Nurumbang, this is the story of country. I'm not translating it. People can walk in and work hard to work out what it says, because we had to work hard to work out English, really hard, and it was really expensive. So, I think that's kind of like part of my journey is okay, I'm going to write in language now wherever I'm asked to and wherever I'm able, because I need to take the advice from the custodians, because you've got to respect the language and make sure I get it right. And I'm not translating it for people, and it doesn't translate directly anyway, and we shouldn't use that word translation. We should use the word interpretation. You can interpret. I probably talk too much. Go to someone else.
And Vicki, would you like to expand on that idea of relearning a language? You talked about picking up your father's dictionary and just saying the words out loud as a practice that you do in your daily life.
Absolutely. If you don't practice something, you're not going to get better at it. So we start clunky and you just practice, and anyone looking through the window might wonder what that crazy woman's doing, walking around talking to herself. But that's how I've been practicing, started learning. I'm kind of, everything we're talking about is so important, and I'm at the moment working, because I do writing in language for different things, including creative writing, but our recognition statement for native titles written wholly in language that I created, and the grammar You talked about the grammar, Evelyn, and that's the key, and that's why I work with linguistics to help us unpack and understand and deeper understanding, because the grammar is hold your worldview. You know, they're ways of knowing, being and doing. And so I've been doing a grammar reconstruction for the Ma Nation languages, which is a family group, language family, different to Kulin and Western Kulin. And so I'm also doing a project trying to do language immersion, because I'm over words, sick to death of just being able to say a word or string words together. And I don't know if I'm talking, well, I know I'm not talking properly, but at the same time, I say to people, talk and practice, because the old people and the country can hear us and they're happy to hear our language again. And we will get better with practice.
I think they forgive us too.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, use it or lose it. And like I said, I'm doing grammar so that we can get our first generation of language speakers. And it's a really, really difficult thing to do, because I've got an Australian Research Council grant.
Yep. Good
Because the governments don't fund language adequately in Australia. The federal and state governments, there's a paucity of language funding here, and it's a global embarrassment, because it's the United Nations International Decade of Indigenous Languages, 22 to 32. And we're nearly halfway through, and the federal government in Australia has only just recently, after a mammoth effort by a group of, I'm on a national language policy partnership and a national language directions group, working with the federal government, and they've only just increased the national language funding from 20 million to 59 million per annum. That's for over 800 languages in Australia. We have the oldest living languages at the fastest rate of attrition. And yes, our languages are in the land and in the country, and they're being reinvigorated, but we don't want to be back at kinder reinvigorating our languages. We want to be first language speakers. So we're working on national legislation, and the state of Victoria does not fund Aboriginal languages or the work of language revitalisation. They fund languages programs in schools and kinders, which is not language revitalisation. It's teaching language so you can learn it. And yes, that is a part of the spectrum of language revitalisation, but it's about this much of it. The rest of the work that needs to be done in creating the language to be taught in the schools is not funded. And any language like Jawarang have their own language worker, they're funding it themselves. We've got separate funding at Eastern Ma in our traditional owner group. And I get to do language work because I went and got a job and I got some money to do it. Because I'm over the words and I want us to be speaking. And, you know, at this time in my life, legacy is my key thing, because my grandchildren are still growing up speaking English first. So there's a lot of work to be done, absolutely. And we have to start doing exactly what all of us are doing and more. We need help too. So any support, lobby the government, tell them, please, because I'm just angry now. I've spent like a lot of our, my father, my grandfather and our old people working, engaging with mainstream, trying to make the changes and bring about, those, and we have our work, the old people's work has been incremental. It's incremental, but we're still a long way from, having that resource to do what we want to do in the revitalisation of our languages and culture. So,
Love your passion and your advocacy on behalf of your language groups. So, Evelyn, do you have something to add to discussion?
Yeah, I already spoke about the sort of the challenges of it, but I think as well it's really worth emphasising the beauty and the strengths that comes from it. And sometimes the conversation gets a little bit horse before the cart in terms of, this kind of context of just what Auntie Vicki was just saying there in terms of like, oh, well, this is all great, so how can we teach it to to kindergarteners and such, and the investment goes in the wrong places, or the questions become, how can people outside of those communities benefit from this work before the investment's really done in those community spaces. But there's such clear and explicit links between health and well-being and language reclamation, and all of the research and all of the data is there, not just in Australia but internationally. You look at the work that was going on with the Bangla language work and recovery with Garna in South Australia.
Yeah, and Gumbangia.
And
Reading school. We all want one.
That work is incredible, and there's been literal tangible links between things like lowering rates of diabetes in community. It's not just that we want our languages for our own sense of cultural well-being. Colonialism is a sickness. It causes physical sickness in our bodies, and we know this constantly as we. I was just this morning on the drive here, I was speaking with Auntie Jeanine about, the hyper-surveillance of our family and by the, social workers and the medical state and things.
And she was talking about now, she's not talking about history. Evelyn's talking about today.
Yeah, and, it's just so heartbreaking that my sister, who does language work, who does cultural support work, who is out running mental health and well-being collectives for Aboriginal women and doing dance and such, who's being hyper-surveilled by social workers because she's Black and she's pregnant. And so she's got strangers coming into her home trying to investigate whether her home is suitable for a baby. But my sister is building the best kind of home for her, that next generation, because her home is filled with culture and strength and weaving and language and, and it doesn't matter how, palatable you are for the colony, we're light-skinned, we've got university degrees. It doesn't matter. That perception is still there and it's still weaponized so explicitly, and Auntie Janine's just got from Auntie Barb Nichols who works she is how many, 90?
Auntie Barb's 91, and that is so freaky that she just tried to call me then. I'll have to call her after the panel. But Auntie Barb is a Wadi Wadi elder, 5 Islands Dreaming. She's 91. I go with Auntie Barb to do work in prisons, the ones we're allowed in. Remember, she's 91. She does this all off her own bat. There's me, Auntie Barb, and this other deadly Bunjalong, but he lives down Sydney, Luke Patterson. Half the people, just about all the people in jail, speaking of wellness, and there's far too many. This is the incarceration nation in jail because they haven't had this language. They haven't had this. This is what is missing. And so what do we do when we go into the jails is get people to write whatever they want to write. And so they've been denied their language, but so many people. But there's a few of the fellas, depends. So there's a few jails we go to. We go to juvie, which is harrowing. We also go Juni Max. There's some fellas in there who know a little bit of language, and when they get to be able to speak it, and that's what we do with them. We do writing workshops. We publish all their work in an anthology every year. Doesn't matter what it's like. It's their story. It's getting published. But just obviously it doesn't work to lock people up and on languages and on revitalisation. If you were talking about any kind of reform for Aboriginal health, well-being, or the things that people bang on about so stereotypically, like prison rates, which are a concern, but the narrative's all wrong the way they talk about it. Language would go so much further towards any kind of, whatever you call it in whitefella language, towards any kind of reform, towards any kind of educational programs that might heal people. Language would be the key to that, and people are still just not getting it, like Vicki said. there are these sort of half tokenistic gestures like, yeah, we'll put it in schools and teach it to kindergarten kids, which I don't want to belittle. That's a start, but that is very meagre.
And it's seen as, it's ticking boxes for the government to say that they're doing that. And my daughter's the same as your sister. She gets under scrutiny. The department checks up on her because she does all that stuff. But yeah, I think that the thing is, language holds all of our cultural knowledge. It's how we express our thinking, our deep philosophical and cultural views, and, our ceremonies and dances and things, we can recreate them, that, those cultural kind of, not objects, but the language is something that is so important, but it's only just becoming, and I don't like to use these words, but a sector. So we're working through closing the gap, which is also not so great, fraught, but it's being recognised as a sector. So in this way, we're doing sector strengthening and development, and what is the language sector and what do we need in it, because there are no job awards, what do you call them, those work awards. There's no pay rates, there's no infrastructure like the Aboriginal Health Services and all the other organisations. So that is being looked at. But in the meantime, we're halfway through the decade of Indigenous languages, and we've published national priorities like stopping the loss and turning the tide. And that is only going to happen with our state language centre here in Victoria. We're the only state that has a state language centre. New South Wales is going gung-ho because they've set up in a different structure, and their government's committed $100 million. The state government in Victoria's committed nothing. They don't even fund the state language centre. And we work from a rights-based approach, so we look at things through a restorative justice and restitution lens, which is wholly different than investment and compensation. Yep. Right? And that's where we've got to move on from reconciliation to restorative justice and restitution, because we did not ask for any of this. And we want never ceded sovereignty, and we want to, empower and enable ourselves to be self-determining. So restitution and restorative justice has to be the way we look at things, because the welfare-dependent cycle that we're in continues. Nothing's changed from when my grandparents, great-grandparents and so on, nothing's changed really. They're same but different, but the incarceration rates, all of those statistics, not much has changed. In fact, Victoria has the highest rate of children in out-of-home care in half the bloody world, actually, not just Australia.
And some of them have actually got worse. And first languages in restorative justice is what is missing. And the idea of circle sentencing as an alternative to locking people up. Countries that have the lowest crime rate do some form of, they might not call it that, but they do some form of what we call Aboriginal justice, because they get the people who are presumably perpetrators to talk with the families and the people they've hurt, not just lock them away. It's a different approach. And also just want to say something about grammar. It's really important. Vicki, Arnie mentioned grammar. It's really important. And grammar is, and there's that kind of assumption that Indigenous languages might be simple. The amount of wiradjuri suffixes that exist to denote different times and different tenses and different places. And you think about once committing all that to memory, and you have to think about the cultural intellect there. And I just honestly think that's one reason why a lot of languages were deliberately ignored, because people are just threatened by the huge cultural intellect that is involved in learning something like this.
I think too, it's linguicide is one of the components of genocide, and it's one of the first things that is enacted is to remove people's language. we're probably getting a bit close to time. I'm wondering whether we let Evelyn have the last word on this bit and get back to you, Jane.
Yes, I just wanted to ask you quickly about the collaborative nature of working with an anthology like this, and particularly with a First Nations editor. Do you want to just talk to that briefly? I haven't got a watch, so I'm not sure what our time.
We've got 3 minutes, so I'm going to be very, very brief. I'm keeping time. I'm in charge now. No, I'm not. I just can't be apart from my phone because I am generationally ruined. Listen, anthologies have such... Oh, you got one too, yeah. Anthologies are actually such a crucial part of Aboriginal literary history and culture. So much of our authorship has always been done collaboratively, and there's such rich traditions. I'm thinking especially of Auntie Kerry Reid Gilbert, the late Auntie Kerry Reid Gilbert, and all of the incredible work that she did in galvanising Aboriginal people across Canberra and Wiradjuri country and Ngunnawal country to, and supporting them towards authorship and these beautiful community-led forms of authorship in collaborative methods. And it's actually not just Aboriginal people, it's also like really significant all throughout the Pacific and Oceania areas. Collaborative authorship is so vital for Indigenous communities because we rarely actually do operate in this kind of individualistic, more Western framework. And so something that I think is a real strength to celebrate here is not just the correspondence and the dialogue of poetic works and essayistic works in this anthology, but also looking at the arts labour and the professional labour being led by Aboriginal people in this production. Jasmine McGaughey is just this incredible Torres Strait Islander and African-American editor and writer and a beautiful emerging talent, and something we really need to be celebrating and building up and affirming in the context of our publishing space and our art spaces is that professional expertise, is knowing that we are not simply just creative voices, but that we also have that expertise to know how to support and produce our work in culturally sensitive and responsive and really wonderful and exciting ways. So celebrating Black authorship, but also editorship and publishing and all those skills is, I think, something so powerful with this work.
And the role of community anthologies. I just want to say, I know we're nearly out of time, but UQP's done a few like this one with Jasmine, Jasmine. There is a Jasmine, but Jasmine put together. They also did another one last year with, creative nonfiction, Firefront by Alison Whittaker. But there is a bit of a history of community anthologies. Magabala Books has done a few, like Riding Around the Country, and they're greatly underrated. And they're really, 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 really important for the length and breadth and demographic and diversity of all Black fellas, not just the really elite writers or artists, because we want to hear from everyone. I mean, yeah, sure, good luck to those people who are at the top but we want to hear from all the voices, and that is why the role of community anthologies are so crucial. And a shout out for all the publishers who do them.
Thank you. We've loved hearing your voices today. So I just want to ask the audience to join me in thanking the three of you for sharing some of your knowledge, your deep knowledge of particularly the role of language in our community and the revitalisation and reclamation of language and how vitally important it is to our culture. So thank you.
Yeah.
And thank you to Jane
as well.
And
can we just also say thank you to Joan? Yeah. And for all the things that are said here today, remember you're here and you can do something. Don't walk away and feel hopeless and helpless in terms of, Vicki said, like this, we need help. You're not the whole public, but you're part of it. Thank you.
Clunes Booktown Festival is presented by Creative Clunes. Tax-deductible donations to keep our stories alive can be made at creativeclunes.org.au. This podcast has been made possible due to the generous support of the Hugh Williamson Foundation.